All right, what's going on today, guys? Joe Rogan was talking to Ryan Graves, who's I think he's a former pilot. Not 100% sure, but let's see what he has to say about these New Jersey drones.
Joe Rogan Experience.
Some of the folks that I've come in contact with, they specifically work on weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that's their job. So if there's a loose nuke in the United States,
there's nothing. I don't believe that there's anything. I mean, they could be looking for potentially a threat of one, or they could be just testing out in case something ever does happen. I believe there's something weird going on, but I just think it's government, not anything else.
it would be sitting in a skiff for 24 hours a day trying to figure out where it is and to go get it, right? So you can imagine that would be their number one priority, right? So I engage with these folks. I ask them, you know, what's the sense here? You know, people are kind of starting to panic a little bit, and this message is getting out there more and more broadly. And they assured me that's not the case, that there is not a loose nuke or other type of weapon of mass destruction that these objects, whatever they are pursuing right now. Otherwise, they would be working in a skiff nonstop to make that go away, that problem.
They would get George Clooney and Nicole Kidman as well.
Go away.
What was that movie called? Peacekeeper?
So, you know, that's part of why I have a high confidence level that...
Now, I will say one thing about this. It is very strange. Now, maybe Rogan contacted him and set up this podcast, but he specifically asked Ryan Graves to be on his show just to actually talk about these drones. Again, where military stuff is concerned, you know, these people that always come out and say, you know, we're no longer in the military, we're no longer working for the FBI, I don't buy it for a second.
Response to a massive imminent, you know, weapons of mass destruction threat.
In other words, if they wanted to get whatever message they wanted to get out through this, they could just send whoever they wanted, or just tell so and so, even him, this is the case.
Threat on the eastern seaboard.
This is what's actually going on. Get this message out.
So I just want to try to dispel that rumor right now. I've seen a lot.
They also said, I think, that there's about 5,000 sightings, but how many of those are the same sighting that multiple people are seeing? And how many of that is the people seeing an airplane and they just want to jump into the hysteria kind of thing?
A lot of talk of that online. And I don't, you know, although this is I think a dangerous and
I also did see
and scary situation that's going on right now, at least from that particular angle.
If you notice something, he alleviates the worst possible fear, right? No nuclear weapons. But he still says there's something scary going on. So that's why I say, like, we're trying to control the message.
That's not the indications.
At least from the CIA or the government.
How would they persuaded you? Just by saying that's not the case? Or have they given you any information that leads to this conclusion? Like,
they would be the people actively working it, essentially, right? So,
and they're not
working it, right? So either the government is holding back that secret from the direct resources within the government that are responsible for finding these systems, or they're not working the issue because there isn't an issue there to work.
So the thing that I had heard was that it was a missing nuke from Ukraine, the type of drone capability that we could send these things out and they would search for gamma radiation and they'd be able to find a nuke. Is that...
So there are teams that respond to those types of potential emergencies. Of drones flying around trying to identify these isn't necessarily the best way. Gamma radiation is typically well shielded in weapons.
And in the Hulk.
And at very high altitudes or even moderate altitudes, like we're seeing these objects, it would be pretty difficult to detect them. And the way that NIST, the DOE typically operates in this environment is ground-based teams searching for radiation itself. So it's not necessarily consistent with how they would do it to begin with. And then
that doesn't mean that they aren't trying to see if they can detect them.
Off of that other information, that's not the case.
Well, that makes me feel better. You know, track these things down to the source. Yeah,
so there's a lot of good questions there. Let me back up by starting with the fact that this started about 2 years ago, at least. So,
but not like this.
A little bit like this.
Really?
So,
in this volume?
Not in this volume. That's the differentiator right there. But
see, that's the thing too. If you go back, it's the same thing every year now. It's been for the last couple of years. That's kind of why I sort of stopped making videos about it. I sort of just kind of went a little bit into it. It's just another case of like social media hysteria.
So Langley Air Force Base, you might be familiar with the fact that they had drone incursions of an unknown type, unknown origin last year.
Right.
And then there was a couple, wasn't there, that they did end up shooting down? And then there was one in Alaska or the Northwest Territories in Canada that they ended up shooting down.
And it's hard to tell exactly with the quality of the reporting right now, because it seems to be, the bigger the story gets, the more people are just looking up and seeing anything and
yeah, it's just the hysteria,
pointing it out.
Yeah.
But there are reports from Texas to Florida to California, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's not. I
mean, if I were to take my drone out today and fly it in the neighborhood, there would probably be somebody would say something about it. The police might even show up, right? And I think, and I said this in a previous video, I think the hysteria is growing right now just to be able to pass legislation. So they use some sort of fear propaganda and then allows them to pass laws that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
This has been occurring for at least 3 years around military bases, and that's nothing to say with the incidents that we were seeing over the Eastern Seaboard and other training ranges that fighter pilots were seeing as they were doing their operations. So I'm a little hesitant to link it to the full story that we've been having here, this full conversation, but at least for 3 years this has been occurring. Mm-hmm. So, kind of getting back to your question.
And that kind of goes back to my Mandela effect theory, where people tend to, because our attention spans right now are so short that we forget certain things. And we're like, oh, that never happened that way. And, I'm sure in a few years, people will be like, that never happened. With the period that we just went through, the last 3 years of the pandemic, and people, that never happened. We never did anything like that. That's what our glorious leader said. I never said any of those things.
It's an unknown right now if they are emitting energy or not. So, like radio communications or their own maybe active sensor systems. It's unknown. I've poked on that front, and the best I can tell, the government doesn't know either.
That seems so weird that they don't know that. Like,
they're not willing to say. It's not that they don't know. They're not willing to say. Now, on the if Biden was the one that was in control, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. But there's other people there, and I severely doubt that they don't know what's going on. I would be shocked.
Task is and navigate via their GPS or whatever tracking system they're using.
Exactly. And then, what is their task, right?
Right.
Is it just to instill panic and fear? Is it because they're sensing something? But we were able to detect these objects with infrared when we were flying off the Eastern Seaboard. There are a number of reports from law enforcement that their infrared systems are not able to pick these objects up. And not just this year, but also the incidents over Langley last year. The pilots that responded to that incident, I've spoken to them, they weren't able to lock these up with their infrared systems either. So they do seem to be exhibiting some type of signature management.
That's interesting. So is the signature management so is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these?
Jets were scrambled for these objects that they were not able to detect. I would have a hard time believing, unless they're going to intentionally allow something to happen, if they scrambled fighter jets to investigate and they were not able to detect them, they didn't know what they were, they would shoot them down, I think, without hesitation. It's either to see how detectable they are, maybe, to see how they come up on radar, but there's not a chance that they wouldn't shoot these things down. There's no way if they didn't know what they were.
To mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all, it's pretty tough. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Mm-hmm. Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.
Right. So it could be something that they're just testing. They're saying, hey, pilots, go up and take a look at this, see what you can find. And they didn't detect them. They didn't pick them up. They're like, hey, these drones are working great. And the right, like I said before, the right hand isn't necessarily telling the left hand, the fighter pilots in this instance, what's actually going on. They're just like, go and see if you can find out what these things are.
The thing that disturbs me is not just that this is happening. There's so many drones and all these people are seeing them. It's happening for so long and nothing has been done. There's no, they're not scrambling jets to try to meet these things and follow them and track them. They're not shooting them down. They're not.
That we know of, again.
It's just, we appear so vulnerable because of this. Mm-hmm. Because if these.
And that's probably intentional as well.
These are ours or if these are people just fucking around and it's not a threat, okay, great. But why is it so prevalent?
And the other day I actually looked, I was talking to a friend of mine. I actually looked on Google, and the trends started on December 3rd for New Jersey drones. So from December 3rd to December 15th, it went from like 1% to 100%. And 100% means it's one of the most active searched items or terms in Google, right? It went from nothing basically to, in about 12 days, to being one of the number one searched terminology, or one of the most searched terms on Google. So
there's some laws in this country that are a little bit antiquated when it comes to dealing with situations like this. So my understanding is right now these things are operating mostly in what's called Class G airspace, which is really low. It's away from airports. Not all, of course, right? They're over bases. I think the government has to make the presumption at this point, based off the feedback from the DOD and others, that if this is not a foreign adversary, then we have to make the assumption that it's a U.S. citizen that's operating these. Because of that, they essentially need a warrant in order to wiretap these.
What?
Yeah.
Even with the Patriot Act?
mm-hmm.
That's the feedback I'm receiving. That's
Yeah, see, exactly. This is just to get more legislation passed.
I don't buy that.
Well, whether it's the reality situation or not, that's how they're proceeding, right? And so to overcome that, there's like a 120-page report that needs to be filed all the way up to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States in order to even intercept these signals.
New Jersey lawmakers were having a press conference asking if the government could shoot one down so they can inspect it. So, I'm assuming they haven't shot one down if they're asking to shoot one down that day,
Now, there was a crashed one. I had it in my video from before. But then again, I don't know when that video was from. That could have been from any time. There was another video where the field was burning. Didn't really show anything. When I went back and looked, it didn't actually look like the same area. So anyways, let me know what you guys think about these drones. I think the hype is kind of over for it, but I've seen a few other things. I've seen like there's potentially orbs involved and stuff like that. And I've actually been reading a book that kind of describes very similar things, big glowing orange orbs in the sky. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.